"I speak 9 languages," said the son of the cleaning lady. The Arab millionaire burst into laughter, but his amusement quickly turned into disbelief. 9 languages? Ha! Kareem Al-Faid's laughter filled the Manhattan penthouse office, sharp and mocking. "Boy, you can barely speak English." David Johnson, just 14, stood clutching his worn backpack. His eyes held steady, though shame burned in his cheeks. Beside him, his mother, Grace Johnson, 42, clutched her mop bucket, hands trembling. She regretted ever letting her son step into this place. Kareem Al-Faid, 48, oil tycoon and master of a $3.5 billion empire, was savoring the moment. The son of his maid, daring to claim such brilliance? To him, it was laughable. "David, apologize to Mr. Al-Faid," Grace whispered, fear heavy in her voice. Losing this job would break them. "No apology needed," Kareem said with a cruel smile. "I want to hear this fantasy." "Go ahead, boy. What are these 9 languages?" David breathed deeply. He knew the world judged him without knowing him. Black, poor, son of a cleaning lady in the Bronx. But he would not shrink. English, Spanish, French, German, Arabic, Mandarin, Russian, Italian, Portuguese. Each word rolled from his tongue with confidence, and for a split second, Kareem's laughter paused. "Liar," he spat, turning back to his marble desk. "Grace, your son needs a doctor, not an audience." Grace lowered her head, humiliation pressing on her shoulders. 5 years she had cleaned this office, swallowed insults, endured cruelty. But hearing her son mocked cut deeper than any wound. "It's okay, Mom," David whispered, touching her arm gently. Kareem watched with satisfaction. He thrived on moments like this, reminding others of their place in the world. His empire was built on wealth, yes, but also on crushing anyone who dared defy him. "You know what I think, Grace," he sneered, leaning back in his $15,000 leather chair. "Your son envies the children of my executives, those who attend the finest schools. So he invents stories to make himself feel important." "Sir," David interrupted, his voice steady, surprising Kareem with its calm dignity. "Do you speak Arabic?" Kareem frowned. "Of course. It is my native language." "Then you understand," David said clearly. "If I say, al-hachicha." The silence that followed was crushing. Kareem Al-Faid's mocking smile froze as he stared at David, processing the flawless Arabic he had just heard. Not the basic greetings a tourist could memorize, but pure, classical Arabic, complex grammar, impeccable pronunciation. Every syllable delivered with precision. Grace looked between her son and Kareem, sensing something had shifted, but not understanding the words. Where did you learn that?" Kareem asked, his voice stripped of its usual arrogance, genuine confusion breaking through for the first time in years. David allowed himself a small smile, the first since stepping into the office. "At the public library, sir. They host free language programs every afternoon." Something stirred in Kareem's chest, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Respect? No, impossible. He forced the thought down. Anyone can memorize a phrase. Kareem scoffed, trying to regain his dominance. "That doesn't mean you speak the language." "You're right, sir," David replied calmly. "That's why I brought this." He reached into his worn backpack and pulled out a set of papers. Kareem leaned forward, and for the first time in years, his composure cracked. The documents bore the seal of Columbia University, certificates of proficiency in multiple languages, each stamped with grades that proved fluency. "That's fake," Kareem stammered, though his voice wavered. David, unfazed, produced another sheet. "This is from the Municipal Library's Advanced Linguistics program. And this one, an online simultaneous translation course I completed last month." Kareem took the papers in trembling hands. The stamps, the signatures, the dates, all real, all consistent. This boy, the 14-year-old son of his cleaning lady, had reached a level of education equal to diplomats and scholars. How? Was all Kareem could whisper. What he didn't know was that David's secret went far deeper than 9 languages. And that secret was about to unravel everything Kareem thought he knew about merit, intelligence, and power. David hadn't walked into this office by accident. For months, he had prepared, collecting information, mastering details, and planning a demonstration that would do more than challenge Kareem's pride. It would expose a truth about the billionaire himself, one capable of shaking the empire he had built. Kareem flipped through the certificates again, desperate to find evidence of forgery. But every page confirmed the same reality. His arrogance was shifting into panic. "That still proves nothing," he muttered, more to himself than to David. "Anyone can take courses online." "You're right," David said with a calmness that unsettled Kareem even more. "That's why I brought this." From his backpack, David pulled out a tablet and opened a video call. Within moments, the screen lit up with an Asian woman seated in an academic office. "Professor Chin," David greeted her in flawless Mandarin. "Could you please confirm to Mr. Al-Fayed my performance in your business translation course?" The professor's face brightened. She responded in rapid, natural Mandarin. Kareem couldn't grasp a single word, but he heard the fluidity, the rhythm, the advanced structures in David's voice as he conversed with ease. Finally, the professor switched to English. "Mr. Al-Fayed, David has been my best student in 15 years of teaching. At just 14, he speaks Mandarin with the fluency of a native. He is extraordinary." Kareem's hand shot out, ending the call abruptly. His palms were damp, his heart pounding. "Grace," he said hoarsely, turning to the woman who had mopped his floors for years. "Did you know about this?" Grace shook her head, stunned. "David has always been smart, sir." "What? This?" 3 years, David interrupted softly. "I started when I was 11. My mom was working 2 jobs to pay for my private school, but she lost the second job during the pandemic. When I returned to public school, the lessons were too easy. So, I used my free time for something better." Kareem felt something tighten in his chest. His own children, pampered in New York's most elite schools with private tutors, had never achieved anything close to this. And yet, this boy, armed only with public libraries, free programs, and relentless drive, was standing here, outshining them all. "What? Why languages?" Kareem asked, for the first time sincerely curious. "Because I wanted to understand the world," David answered simply. And because when you speak to people in their own language, they stop seeing you as a stranger and start seeing you as a human being. The words hit Kareem like a blow. For years, he had hidden behind his Arab heritage, using cultural differences as an excuse to stay distant from his American employees, when in truth it had always been arrogance. "David," Kareem whispered slowly, "you're 14. That's impossible." David smiled faintly. "The impossible is just the possible that hasn't happened yet." For the first time in 5 years, Kareem turned to truly see Grace, a woman who had raised a genius while scrubbing his offices, sacrificing every comfort so her son could thrive. "David," Kareem said, his voice no longer mocking, "why did you come here today? Your mother could lose her job." David glanced at Grace, who gave him the smallest nod. "Because I heard you on the phone yesterday," he said calmly. "You were discussing a contract in Arabic with Middle Eastern investors. But you made mistakes that could cost you millions." Kareem's face went pale. "What? What kind of mistakes?" "You used Mubashir when you should have said Ajil for urgency," David explained steadily. "And you confused Miraik with Miraib when speaking about deadlines. Small mistakes, ones that completely changed the meaning." Kareem sat down heavily, his chest tight. He remembered how puzzled the investors had looked during that call. He had blamed it on poor reception. But now he knew the truth. His errors had nearly sabotaged a $50 million deal. "How did you even know I was making mistakes?" Kareem asked. "Because I've been studying business Arabic for 2 years," David replied steadily. "It's my specialty." Kareem stared at him, seeing the boy with new eyes. 14 years old, yet already an expert in international business communication. "David," Kareem said slowly, his voice softer than ever, "you saved my business without me even realizing it." "Actually," David replied, pulling another document from his backpack, "I did more than that." Kareem took the paper. His breath caught. It was a full proposal, an analysis of his company's international communications. The report identified recurring linguistic flaws that had cost him deals and offered concrete solutions. You analyzed my company?" Kareem whispered. "Only the public side," David explained. "Press releases, transcripts, official statements online. I noticed patterns of mistakes that explain why some negotiations failed." Kareem read the document twice, his pulse racing. It was brilliant, worth not just millions, but potentially hundreds of millions in recovered contracts. "Why?" Kareem asked, utterly bewildered. "Why would you do this?" David drew in a breath. "Because I wanted to show you that value isn't about who your parents are or how much money they have. It's about what you can actually contribute." Something cracked inside Kareem. For years, he had believed success was inherited, that intelligence was tied to wealth and privilege. This boy had shattered that illusion in minutes. "Kareem Al-Fayed," David said, deliberately using his full name. "Can I ask you a question?" Kareem nodded weakly. "If a kid like me can do this with nothing but public libraries," David continued, his voice sharp with conviction, "what do you think other kids like me could achieve if they had the same opportunities your children enjoy?" The question hung in the air like a thunderclap, shaking the walls of the office. But David wasn't finished, because buried in his battered backpack was one more piece of evidence, something far more dangerous than certificates or proposals. Kareem was still reeling when David pulled out a small digital recorder. Its metallic glint made the billionaire's blood run cold. "Before I answer your question," David said calmly, "there's something you need to hear." He pressed play. The room filled with Kareem's own unmistakable voice. "Greater than. These black Americans are all the same. Lazy, uneducated, always blaming others for their failures. That's why I only hire Arabs and whites for the important positions." Grace gasped, covering her mouth. Kareem's face drained of color. "Where did you get that?" Kareem stammered. "In the elevator last week," David replied coldly. "You were talking to your vice president about hiring policy. You didn't notice I was there." Kareem's heart sank. He remembered it. Every word. He and Robert Chun had been debating why black employees weren't promoted to executive roles. He had assumed no one else was listening. "That's illegal. You can't record private conversations." Kareem snapped, his voice rising. "New York is a one-party consent state," David answered evenly. "Perfectly legal. And since it proves systematic racial discrimination, I'm sure the Department of Labor would be very interested." The room tilted. Kareem felt the world spinning out of control. A single recording like this could destroy his empire, trigger lawsuits, collapse his reputation. "What? What do you want?" he whispered hoarsely. David smiled, but it wasn't the smile of a child. It was the cold, measured smile of someone who had planned every move long before the game began. "I want you to choose," David said, stepping toward Kareem's desk, his voice steady and unwavering. "You can cling to the belief that people like me and my mother are beneath you, and this recording will be on the desk of every journalist and labor lawyer in New York by tonight." Kareem swallowed, his throat dry. "Or," David continued, his eyes locking with his, "you can prove that you actually learned something today. I want my mother promoted to facility supervisor with an $80,000 salary. I want a scholarship program for kids from disadvantaged backgrounds. And I want you to hire me as a junior language consultant." "You're 14 years old," Kareem protested, grasping for ground. "And I speak 9 languages better than anyone on your payroll," David shot back without hesitation. "Besides, I've already saved your company millions. You know it." Kareem turned to Grace. She stood silent, but her eyes glowed with pride, a pride he had never noticed in her before. "Grace," Kareem said, his voice breaking, "you've raised a genius. I've raised a man," Grace replied firmly. "A man who knows his worth and refuses to be treated as less." David pulled a document from his backpack and placed it on the desk. "I've already prepared the contract. You have 5 minutes to sign before this recording goes public." Kareem picked it up with trembling hands. It was airtight, detailed, professional, with clauses that protected both David and Grace from retaliation. The boy had covered everything. "And how do I know you won't release the recording anyway?" Kareem asked. "Because unlike you," David said, his gaze piercing, "I believe in second chances if someone truly wants to change." Kareem scanned the pages again. The demands weren't outrageous. If anything, They were modest compared to what David was worth. But signing meant admitting he had been wrong about everything. "And if I refuse?" Kareem asked quietly, though he already knew. David calmly took out his phone. Then this recording goes to the New York Times, CNN, and the Attorney General's office in. He checked his watch. 3 minutes and 40 seconds. "You're blackmailing me," Kareem muttered. "I'm offering you justice," David corrected. "You've built an empire on an unjust system. This is your chance to start fixing it." Kareem turned toward the Manhattan skyline, the empire he had conquered with intelligence and cruelty. Yet this boy had beaten him at both. "Grace," Kareem said softly, "do you accept the promotion?" Grace looked at her son. David nodded. "I accept," she said. Kareem picked up his solid gold pen and signed the contract. His hand shook as he said, "David Johnson, you just taught me the most expensive and most valuable lesson of my life." "What lesson?" David asked. "That true intelligence isn't about where you were born or how much wealth you have," Kareem said. "It's about what you create with the opportunities you carve out for yourself." David tucked away the recorder and extended his hand. "Welcome to the 21st century, Mr. Al-Fayed." Kareem shook it, realizing this wasn't just a deal. It was a transformation. And then David did something no one expected. He pulled 2 more recorders from his backpack. "For the record," he said coolly, "today's entire meeting, including you signing this contract willingly, is preserved." Twice. For the first time in years, Kareem laughed. Not the cruel laugh of dominance, but the genuine laugh of admiration. "You're frighteningly smart, kid." "No," David replied with a faint smile. "I just prepared better." Kareem thought the lesson was over. But David wasn't done. Hidden deeper in that backpack was one last revelation, a secret about Kareem's own past that would unravel everything he thought he knew about his identity, his empire, and the true meaning of merit. 6 months later, Kareem Al-Fayed sat at a round table in the Bronx Public Library, surrounded by eager young people benefiting from the scholarship program David had demanded. The man who once sneered at public libraries as symbols of failure now saw them for what they truly were: the beating heart of opportunity and the birthplace of a revolution he never saw coming. Mr. Al-Fayed leaned back in his chair, smiling at the group of teenagers gathered in the sleek but welcoming conference room. "Is it true?" asked Maria, a 15-year-old Latina girl with curious eyes, "that David got his first job at 14 by blackmailing you?" Kareem laughed, not bitterly this time, but with genuine warmth. "It's true, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me." David, now 15 and officially the youngest language consultant in American corporate history, glanced up from the stack of contracts on his desk. Each page was worth millions. In just 6 months, his corrections and recommendations had generated over $200 million in new business for Al-Fayed Industries. "Tell the whole story," Maria insisted, leaning forward eagerly. Kareem looked over at Grace, now dressed in tailored suits, her posture confident. Once a cleaning lady, she now stood among the company's most respected executives as facility supervisor. She smiled and gave him a small nod. 6 months ago, Kareem began, his voice steady. "I was a wealthy man, but a miserable one. I believed money made me better than others. Then David walked into my office and proved me wrong. He taught me that intelligence isn't about where you come from. It's about what you do with the chances you create. But how did he know it would work? Asked Carlos, a 13-year-old boy who had recently begun studying programming through the scholarship program. David finally lifted his eyes from the contracts. Because I studied him. For months. I found out Mr. Al-Fayed had once been just like me, a poor immigrant from Lebanon. He came here at 16, barely speaking English, and built everything from nothing. Kareem nodded slowly, and David reminded me of something I had forgotten, that I had become the very kind of man who once looked down on me. I had lost sight of my own origins. And now? Maria asked, her voice full of hope. Now, Grace answered proudly, this company is the most diverse in the industry. We hire based on talent, not last name or zip code. Kareem rose from his chair and walked to the far wall. Framed certificates hung proudly, 50 in total. The first graduates of the David Johnson Young Talent Program. Do you know what my greatest discovery has been? Kareem asked, turning to the group. What? They asked in unison. That when you invest in people, no matter their background, they don't just grow. They make you grow too. David closed his laptop and joined them, his presence calm but commanding. Mr. Al-Fayed had every opportunity in the world, David said, but he almost threw away the most important one of all, the chance to be a decent human being. What about you? Carlos asked. Weren't you scared? Weren't you afraid of failing? David smiled faintly. Of course I was, but my mother always told me, the greatest failure isn't falling short. It's accepting to be treated as less than you're worth. I would rather risk everything than live invisible. Hassan looked at David with true admiration. What impressed him most wasn't the boy's 9 languages or his analysis of billion-dollar contracts. It was his courage, the courage to stand up to a powerful man, knowing it could destroy his own family's life. You had a plan, didn't you? Maria pressed. David smiled. Always have a plan, and always have proof. Grace stood. Time to go, David. We have a meeting with the Japanese investors. Hassan turned to the young people gathered in the room. Want to know the best part? David now earns more at 15 than I did at his age. Not from privilege, not from inheritance, but from pure merit. As they stepped into the sleek company car, Hassan walked behind them, reflecting on how completely his life had changed. David, he said quietly, I need to confess something. David paused. What is it? You didn't just save my company. You saved my soul. I was becoming a monster, wealthy, powerful, but empty inside. You reminded me that true success is measured not by how many people you can step on, but by how many you can lift up. Grace kissed her son's forehead. I'm proud of you, baby. Not for the money or the fame, but for the man you're becoming. And I, Hassan added softly, am honored to have learned from both of you that family isn't about blood. It's about the people who make you want to be better. That afternoon, during the meeting, David translated flawlessly, securing a $500 million deal. Hassan watched in, remembering the day he had mocked that same boy. Afterward, a Forbes reporter rushed over. "Mr. Al-Mansuri, how does it feel to be the first billionaire CEO with a 15-year-old advisor?" Hassan smiled. "It feels like I finally understand leadership. It's not about being the smartest in the room. It's about recognizing and nurturing the brilliance of others. And you, David? What's your advice to young people?" David thought for a moment. "Never let anyone define your worth. Your beginnings don't decide your future. And always, always be prepared with evidence." The journalist leaned forward. "Do you believe this story can inspire others?" Grace answered firmly. "This proves that when talent meets opportunity and courage meets preparation, there are no limits." Hassan nodded. "David taught me that true wealth isn't what you keep, it's what you build. The greatest investment any of us can make is in human potential." And so, David's story became proof that real intelligence knows no color, no social class, and no age. If this journey of courage and justice moved you, stay with us, because knowledge is the one weapon that no one can ever take away.